Hello everybody, I hope you are fine. This is Poetry Grade 2 Lecture 3. Holy Sonnets by John Donne. This is our third poem in the syllabus. We have taken The Flea, which belongs to John Donne's first stage of poetry, which is characterized by writing erotic poetry. Then we have taken a valediction forbidding mourning, which belongs to the second stage of his poetry. That stage started after his marriage to Anne More and was characterized by writing serious poems about spiritual love. The third stage in his life started after the death of Anne More, which consisted of writing philosophical and religious poems about death, about religion, about the nature of God, about heaven and hell, as he became the dean of St. Paul Cathedral. This poem is written after the death of Anne More, his wife. The poet addresses death directly in a kind of challenge, saying, "Death, be not proud. Though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. أيها الموت لا تكن مغرور، بالرغم ان البعض بيسميك mighty يعني جبار، dreadful مخيف، for thou are not so يعني you are not so، انت مش كده في الحقيقة. for those whom thou thinkst thou dost overthrow، الناس اللي انت بتعتقد ان انت قضيت عليها او اهلكتها بالفعل. die not ما ماتوش، poor death ايها الموت البائس، nor yet canst thou kill me يعني ولا حتى انت تقدر تموتني انا. from rest and sleep which but thy pictures be، من الراحة والنوم اللي هي صورك، much pleasures كثير من المتعة، then from thee much more must flow بيتدفق. يبقى في الجزء ده John Donne is the speaker of the poem أو is the persona speaking in the poem. He is addressing death in a kind of apostrophe. Apostrophe means the poet addresses a non-existent entity or not a concrete entity. Here the poet is addressing death, asking him not to be arrogant, claiming that death is not as fearful as the people think. Dead people only receive comfort and short sleep before they resurrect again and live eternally in heaven. The only pictures of death are sleep and rest or comfort, so that death is the source of pleasure, not fear. The word flow يتدفق is a conceit because the pleasure is compared to water flowing. Pleasure is compared to water flowing. And soonest our best men with thee do go، يعني دايما الناس الكويسة اللي بتروح مع الموت بتكون هي الناس الصغيرة في السن، فدي حاجة مش تعيب اي حد ان هو يموت في سن مبكر. rest of their bones and souls delivery، اللي بيحصل للناس اللي بتموت عظمهم بيرتاح، و their souls أرواحهم بيحصل لها delivery يعني ميلادة، يعني new birth، يعني الروح لما بتطلع السما لربها مش بتبقى دي the end، بالعكس ده دي the beginning of another form of life in heaven. Thou art a slave to fate، هنا the poet is telling death that death is the slave of fate, chance, kings, and desperate men, meaning that death does not have freedom of choice. Death is the servant or the slave of other factors such as fate, chance, القدر، الصدفة. kings and desperate men اللي هم الناس اليائسة، مقصود بيها people who decide to commit suicide. Then the poet, in a contempt of death, tells it that it lives in dirty places among poison, war, and sickness. يعني بيقول the poet is addressing death that it dust with poison, war, and sickness dwell. يعني الموت بيسكن وسط السم والحروب والأمراض. طبعا هنا ده في personification، تشخيص in death is compared to someone who lives in a dirty place. And the poppy or charms can make us sleep as well. يعني الشاعر هنا بيقول إن the same effect of sleep got from death can be gotten also by magic or poppy, a kind of drugs. And better than thy stroke, and maybe poppy, drugs, or charms, magic or witchcraft are better than death in their sleep. Why swellest thou then? swell اللي هو متورم أو منفوخ، يعني انت بقى منفوخ على ايه؟ يعني معناها انت مغرور بايه؟ ودي طبعا rhetorical question، سؤال بلاغي. يعني when we meet a question inside the poem, it's a rhetorical question which needs no answer. One short sleep passed, we wake eternally. يعني نومة قصيرة عدت وبعد كده بنفضل صاحيين للأبد. And death shall be no more. يعني بعد ما الناس كلها تموت وبعد كده تبعث في الآخرة، ساعتها الموت مش هيكون ليه وجود، لأن خلاص مش هيكون في ناس تانية لسه عايشة عشان الموت يروح يموتها. Death thou shalt die. أيها الموت أنت هتموت. طبعا دي a very famous paradox أو illogical statement أو contradictory statement، إن death thou shalt die، إن الموت هو اللي هيموت في النهاية. واحنا قلنا ان البارادوكس انها في البداية بتبدو انها غريبة او غامضة، ولما بنفهم المعنى المقصود منها بنبدأ ان احنا نفهمها. فهنا الشاعر قصده ان after the death of all people and the resurrection in the afterlife, death will be no more. Looking at the form of the poem is a sonnet which consists of 14 lines. The poem is a sonnet which consists of 14 lines. The rhyme scheme, if we look at the last word in every line of poetry, the takes the letter A, so takes letter B because it's not the same sound, overthrow the letter B because it's the same sound as so, kill me is the sound as the, so it takes the letter A. يبقى A B B A B, it takes the letter A. Flow, such as overthrow, go, the same as flow and overthrow. Delivery is a different sound, so it takes the letter C. In this manner we will continue the rhyme scheme of the poem. The poem is famous for its conceits, such as comparing death to someone, in which the poet is making a challenge against. A second conceit, comparing the pleasure gotten from death to sleep and rest or water overflow. Then the poem has extended the personification of comparing death to a servant or a slave, to fate and kings and desperate people who decide to commit suicide to end their lives. The same personification is in the word dwell, يعني live, يسكن, and the death is compared to a person who dwells or lives in a dirty place. Why swellest thou then? It's a rhetorical question, and the word swell is a medical allusion. One short sleep past means death in the grave. We wake eternally means the life and the afterlife in heaven. Death, thou shalt die is the paradox of the poem. The tone of the poem is a challenging tone. The poet is challenging death, claiming that death cannot defeat the poet. So that the poet all over the poem is trying to make understatement of death. This is a contradiction of the traditional image of death, which is based on awesome and terror. The theme of the poem is of course death, particularly challenge of death. The poem has much of the characteristics of the metaphysical school of poetry. There are conceits. The style is argumentative. There is a mixture between passion and reason. The use of conceit is over there all through the poem, such as soul's delivery, in which the poet compares the soul to the childbirth of someone, which means that the soul of the dead person starts a new life in heaven. The words inside the poem are short syllabic words, which makes the pronunciation of words rather fast, and this asserts the challenging tone of the poem. There is a number of musical elements, such as alliteration in the first line between die and death. Then in the third line we have another alliteration between much, more, must. There is another alliteration between from and flow. There is internal rhyme. There is end rhyme. There is alliteration. The poet manipulates punctuation, such as the comma, in order to make lists of choices, such as fate, comma, chance, comma, kings, comma, and desperate men, comma. The writer is trying to provide run-on lines in order to force the reader to continue reading the lines as one sentence or one block of meaning. The poem includes many of the characteristics of the metaphysical school of poetry, and it belongs to the final stage or third stage of John Donne's poetic career after the death of his wife. So it's a subjective somehow, based on a personal experience. It reveals his sadness and his resistance of death. Next lecture, inshallah, we will take the critical appreciation of this poem and a general revision on John Donne's poetry. Thank you for your follow-up, and goodbye.